All right, everyone. Last night I got into it with one, leftist on Twitter. They're like, "Oh, well, you haven't even made your final election predictions." Ha ha ha. Basically rambling about how Nate Silver somehow is accurate, which is, I think, probably the most hilarious thing I've ever heard. Nate meta conglomerate, or actually, I call him. But because of the UnaBoomer, the boomer bomber, the MAGA bomber, the edgiest dude ever to exist, it apparently meant not to hurt anyone. That's been more or less confirmed, which is very interesting. That's thrown the midterms into a little bit of a tizzy. It's very difficult. Like my prediction with regards to the Senate remains the same. The Republicans will hold the Senate. They're not going to lose control of it. They're too far ahead in too many of the contested states. Early voting favors them significantly. That in a close race where the Democrat otherwise would have won by a point or two, the early voting totals will buoy them up, like in Florida and places like that. So the Republicans retain the Senate. That's an official prediction, unless there's a drastic shift in the polls, and I don't think that even this UnaBoomer bullshit can do that. Unless that happens, I wouldn't predict that they'd lose the Senate. The House is a different story. In the House, I've consistently said Trump needs to be at 45 to give the Republicans a 50-50 shot at keeping the House. It's looking like he won't quite achieve that. He was on an upward swing, but it's impossible to suggest a scenario, I think, unless the Democrats overstretch and look like they're being opportunistic about human suffering, which is possible. It's just I think they might have learned their lesson from Kavanaugh not to do that again before the midterms. It's difficult to envision any other scenario in which recent events favor the Republicans. That probably stalls out the growth of their support. Now, because of a combination of a lot of people having already voted, a lot of people having made up their minds, a lot of the remnant being partisan anyway, or being either specifically anti-Trump or pro-Trump, 90% of the votes are already, basically, you can count on them. That's why the Republicans will retain the Senate, in my estimation. But there are more races in the House that are close. There are a significant number of contested, relatively close House races. If they begin moving even a few points back in the Democrats' direction, where the Republicans were slowly moving ahead, that would ruin their chances of retaining the House regardless of what Trump's approval is. And you would imagine it's probably not going to grow because of this. You have someone who made a bunch of fake, apparently, explosives in the name of Trump. Unfortunately, I may be intelligent enough to realize that's fishy, number one, and number two, Trump is not commanding people to go out and bomb things. It has nothing that Trump has said would lead any sane person to do this, and it's a person who has a prior conviction for making terroristic threats. This is a person who's a criminal anyway and not playing with a full deck. He doesn't need Trump as an impetus to be violent or potentially violent. Unfortunately, though, there are enough normies that are easily fooled by propaganda that a lot of those people might say in the 11th hour, well, can't vote for those Republicans. I'm going to vote straight Democrat because of my political violence. Now, of course, they might want to take a look at what people like Maxine Waters and Clinton have said, but they probably won't. Because you've got to realize that if they're normies, they're watching corporate media. Man, they're not coming here for news. They're not watching me. They're not watching some person online that has intelligent, independent commentary. They're watching some multi-million-dollar pundit on a multi-billion-dollar multinational network that supports full-on authoritarian globalism. They're getting their news from them. They're getting their news from their literal taskmasters without realizing and thinking that it's true. So there's some of those people who would otherwise be like, yeah, I kind of lean right because my taxes or something. They'll ignore that. Ultimately, though, if the Republicans do maintain the House, it'll be because of economics. It'll be because of economics. The other part is this. Here's the other part that's made it consistently difficult. We don't know if there's a differential in polling. It looks like there's a turnout differential. That's a pretty good indicator that at least one of the following two is true. The polls are still systemically oversampling Democrats, or there is unexpected post-Kavanaugh high turnout for Republicans. It's probably some combination of the two, the former probably less than the latter. In which case the Republicans could already be fairly ahead. It could be the generic ballot is meaningless at this point. The Republicans are at least breaking even. In a lot of these races, in places that Trump controlled, you'd expect them to win. But we don't know that for sure. It's not like 2016. In 2016, the election was cut and dry. The election in 2016 was very clear. It was actually very transparent what was going on to anyone who bothered to take the time to look into polling methodology, look into historical trends, understand we're in a paradigm shift, and then understand, hey, Trump is being sorely underestimated by a party that ultimately is falling apart. In this election, the Republicans also have schismatic tendencies, although it is under control. The Democrats are continuing to fracture. However, the left has been used dog whistle style by the corporate liberals continuously. It looks like it'll at least hold through the midterms, not necessarily 2020. That's a different story. By the way, I still hold to another belief that I've continued to stress. While it looks likely that the Republicans will lose the House, it's better than 50-50 shot. I disagree with HA on this one, by the way. While that's likely, that actually boosts their chances in 2020. Because Trump is going to be obstructed for the next 2 years. If the Democrats, though, have retaken the House, he can blame the Democrats. Otherwise, he can't blame them. If the Republicans control the House and the Senate, how the fuck is Trump supposed to campaign on obstructionism, stopping his wonderful agenda, and make that case to Republican lay people? He can't, because they're not all MAGA fans. A lot of them are just partisan Republicans. And if they see that all of the Republicans in Congress are like, no, Mr. Trump, it's not our fault, they're going to believe the vast bulk of Republicans, not Trump. But if the House is run by Democrats, where's your obstruction coming from? Oh, vote these guys back out. Look, I wanted to lower your taxes. I wanted to build the wall. I wanted more peace with North Korea. I wanted to continue to deregulate. I can't do that. Give me a better House of Representatives. That's a winning ticket, by the way, in conjunction with the economy. By the way, why do you think the economy... Well, why do you think the stock market right now is falling? It's falling because all of those business owners and investors are looking at the election saying there's a better than 50-50 shot the House goes to the Democrats. If, by the way, if by some miracle the Republicans manage to retain the House, you can look for the stock market to shoot back upwards. It'll recover all of those losses. Right now, people are getting a little worried because they're worried that Trump will no longer have a mandate to deregulate things. They're worried that the House will go towards a party that likes high business taxes. It likes globalism even more than the neocons do. It likes war, in all honesty. Trump is fairly anti-war. And it likes to tax people up the ass. It likes to regulate everything in existence. The Republicans don't really represent an anti-regulation movement, but they do represent adding fewer regulations, slowing down the slow march of bureaucracy. That's basically... The Republicans want to slow down tyranny. The Democrats want to go for it full throttle. Trump wants to take you back slowly away from it and reform the system. He's facing obstruction from both of the others. He seems like a fanatic compared to Republicans that are really just Democrats that have a little bit more sanity, maybe, generally speaking. They're really not that different after all. It's like gun control. The Republicans aren't a pro-gun party. They're just less pro-gun control. They're like, no. Gun control is great. We've already got it, though, so we don't want any more of it. But we're not going to go for repealing any of it. Oh, my goodness, that would be fanaticism. It'd be fanaticism to return to a proper understanding of the right to bear arms and defend yourself. Now, the UnaBoomer. We have to wait at least, I would say, 4 or 5 days for the next polling period to begin culminating to see if there's significant movement. Now, don't even look at the aggregate at this late stage. Look at the individual polling firms and compare the number before this with the number after and see if there is consistent movement. That will show you the amount of movement generally. You can aggregate it and get a better estimate. I'd be surprised if the Republicans didn't take a hit from this. Then again, there's also another possibility. Let's say in the next couple of days the FBI comes out and says, oh, yeah, he was like a total burning progressive. He basically recently became a MAGA convert because he was pissed off at the DNC. Then the Republicans will shoot ahead. It'll be very, very funny if that happens. It would also fulfill one of my predictions. Now, he did register, Sayok did register as a Republican in 2016. 3 months after the election was already over. In fact, 4 months after it was over, 3 months after the oath of office was administered. That points to the very high likelihood that I was actually right. So yeah, I'm not going back on it yet. I don't have any proof that he wasn't like a raging liberal before. I mean, he's a Native American supremacist, it seems. Felon, lengthy criminal record. It seems like someone who probably wouldn't appreciate the hard-on crime and supposedly white supremacist Republicans. It seems like someone who might be a Bernie bro more than anything else. There's still a possibility of that. By the way, it's still funny when Jared Holt called called Antifa anti-fascist. It's not what they are. You can use the Newspeak labels all you want. It's like saying if I label myself God Man, it doesn't make me God Man. It's just a label that I've chosen for myself. Scrambles people's minds. Just label things improperly. They can't wrap their heads around the possibility that they should be attacking the existence of the label rather than what it supposedly stands for. You can get people to chase ghosts this way. It's really funny. No, I'm not ready to make a final prediction. With the exception of the Senate stays Republican. It may only stay Republican at 51 seats. It may not have any net gain at this point. Although I expect them to gain a seat or two at the very least. I think the polls, especially in Texas, are pretty damning for the Democrats. They retain the Senate. They'll retain control of the Senate, which means, by the way, you may see a battle over Ginsburg if she keels over. She's an old woman. She's in her mid-80s. She might die in the next year or two. If she does, Trump gets to replace the ultimate liberal on the Supreme Court, and he'll have control of the Senate. Now look for the Republicans. By the way, another prediction. If that does happen, the Republicans will stonewall him if he tries to put in another Gorsuch. They're going to say, no, Mr. Trump, you're going to find a centrist individual who nonetheless is pro-Roe v. Wade. You can have pro-guns. You can have maybe pro-smaller government or anti-tax or something like that. It's fine. But don't you fucking go after any moral issues. They're going to have to lean left on those. That's what you'll get. And they'll be right, strategy-wise. Otherwise, you'd have such high liberal turnout in 2020, Trump would get laid waste to. That's about all. Peace out.